are doing constrained non-smooth convex minimization. So we want to minimize the function f subject to the constraint that x is in a set C. Okay. The function f is assumed to be a convex function, but it need not be smooth, meaning that the gradients need not even be defined at certain points. And because the function is convex, you still have a notion of subgradient, right? Okay. So the function is non-smooth. So the gradients can change arbitrarily, even for close by points. Okay. So that's what non-smooth means. And the constraint set C, script C, is assumed to be a convex constraint set. And our goal is to minimize the function f subject to this constraint. Okay. And we will call, so our goal is to find an epsilon suboptimal feasible solution x twiddle. So we want feasibility. So x twiddle has to be in the constraint set C. And we want epsilon suboptimality, meaning that the function value at x twiddle is off from the minimum value by at most an epsilon value. Okay. So you want to find an x twiddle which is first feasible. So x twiddle is in C, and then the function value suboptimality is at most epsilon. Okay. That's our goal. And we are also interested in the high dimensional regime where the dimension d is much larger compared to any polynomial of 1 over epsilon. Okay, so we would ideally want to have methods that have a convergence rate which is independent of the dimension d. Okay, because x is in the d dimensions, you have to at least do a linear for doing a single update. So if you're updating the entire vector, you will have to do at least d amount of work. But the hope is that you want to design methods whose convergence rate, meaning the number of iterations itself, does not depend on the dimension d. Okay, and the classical we need to assume a little bit more about the function. So in order to give a complexity bound for this problem, we need to assume a bit more about the functions and the constraint set. So regarding the function, basically all we assume is that we already said f is convex. Now we assume that f is Lipschitz continuous. Okay, meaning that the difference in function values between 2 points x and y is at most a constant g, which is the Lipschitz constant, times norm of x minus y. Okay, and this allows non-smoothness in the sense that if you look at f of x equal to say mod x in one dimension, then it satisfies this property with g equal to 1, but the gradient is not even defined at x equal to 0, right? So that's why we still say that f can be non-smooth, but it's Lipschitz continuous. So the second assumption we have is on the diameter of the constraint set. So we assume that the diameter of the constraint set, which is the maximum distance between x and y, both belonging to the set, is at most d. Okay, and in the entirety of this talk, whenever I use a norm, it's the L2 norm. Okay, and all our results are specifically for the Euclidean norm. Okay, so this norm is Euclidean and this norm is also Euclidean. Okay, so the next question is how do we have access to the function and the constraint set, right? For the function, we assume that we have access to a first order oracle, meaning that so for any point x, we can query the subgradient at x, and subgradient of a convex function gives you a linear function, which is a lower bound on the function everywhere. Okay, so for example, for the function mod x, the subgradient is -1 for x less than 0, +1 for x greater than 0, and at x equal to 0, the function is not differentiable. But there are subgradients, and the subgradients are is the entire set between -1 and 1. Okay, to the left the gradient is -1, to the right the gradient is 1, and at 0 the subgradient is the set -1 to 1. Okay, and any element in -1 to 1 is a valid subgradient. Okay, and to the constraint set, we assume that we have access to a projection oracle, which if we give it any point x, it will return us the point y in the constraint set, which is closest to x. Okay, so it minimizes over all y in the constraint set, x minus y square, and then returns us the corresponding y. So this is the projection oracle. So we have access to the function through the first order oracle, and we have access to the constraint set through the projection oracle. Okay, and using both of these, we would like to find an epsilon suboptimal feasible solution x twiddle for this minimization problem. Okay, so I hope the setting is clear. Okay. Right, and I should mention that because we are assuming these black box oracles, we cannot use sophisticated methods like interior point methods or augmented Lagrangian methods. For example, interior point methods requires access to a self-concordant barrier to the constraint set, whereas here we're only assuming access to a projection oracle to the constraint set. And augmented Lagrangian methods again assume explicit form like equations for the describing the constraint set, okay, which again we don't have. We only have access to a projection oracle. And the reason to study this in the black box settings is that like algorithms which rely on only these kind of assumptions are very widely applicable. And one of the most prominent algorithms that falls under this setting is the subgradient descent algorithm. So before I go ahead, so I want to mention that the oracle complexity of any method is the number of oracle calls it does to the first order oracle and the projection oracle. Okay, so we would like to minimize the number of oracle calls we'll be doing here, because this projection oracle in general has to be implemented by some other subroutine, and similarly a first order oracle will have to be implemented by some other subroutine which computes the gradient of this function, right? So the complexity of any method is the number of oracle calls. And the reason for considering black box oracles, algorithms working only with black box oracles, because the setting is fairly general. And one of the most prominent algorithms that falls into this category is the projected gradient descent or projected subgradient descent, where we start with a feasible point x0 in the constraint set. For example, you could just project 0 onto the set and then get x0 as the projection of 0, right? And then in every iteration, we compute the, we query the gradient of the function at xk minus 1, right? In the first iteration, we query the gradient at x0, and then we move in the negative direction of the gradient. So x0 minus eta 0 g0, eta 1 g0, and then we again project it back onto the constraint set, right? So in pictures, we have this picture here. Let's say xk minus 1 is this. Then the gradient and the step size take us to this point here, right? And then we again project it back onto the set, and then this is xk, and then we repeat this procedure. So this algorithm, as you can see, is very, very simple and very widely used for especially in like a lot of machine learning applications. And the guarantee for minimizing a convex function under the assumptions we had, which is that the function is G Lipschitz, and the diameter of the constraint set is at most D, right? So let's say both of them are constants. So we'll not explicitly mention the dependence on G and D, but they'll be hidden in the theta notation here, right? So the guarantee is that if you run this algorithm, then the function value of the average iterate, so 1 over k summation I equal to 1 to k, right? This is the average iterate. The suboptimality of this is at most epsilon, okay? Once the number of iterations k is greater than or equal to 1 over epsilon square. So the number of iterations scales as 1 over epsilon square, but there is no dependence on the dimension, underlying dimension, right? And this is what we meant by the high dimensional setting, where the number of iterations is independent of the dimension. The second thing to note is that so each point xi that we have here is actually being projected onto the constraint set. So each point here indeed belongs to the constraint set, right? And because the set C is convex, the average also belongs to the constraint set. So we this projected subgradient descent finds an epsilon suboptimal feasible solution in 1 over epsilon square iterations. Okay. So what this means is that the number of first order oracle calls and the number of projection oracle calls, right, is equal to the total number of iterations, which is 1 over epsilon square. Okay. Right. So the natural question that we would like to ask is whether this is the best we can do, and the answer is actually mixed. So classically, it's very well known that the number of first order oracle calls is that we have here is indeed optimal. The 1 over epsilon square dependence here is indeed optimal, and this goes back to the book by Nemirovsky and Yudin, where they showed this lower bound for even randomized algorithms. So you consider any randomized algorithm that works in this black box setting, meaning that it has access only to the first order oracle and the projection oracle, then the number of first order oracle calls it needs to do is at least G square D square over epsilon square. Okay, and this dependence on epsilon square is indeed tight, because projected subgradient descent can indeed achieve this complexity. Now, what is surprising is that when we ask how many projections we really need, we actually don't know of any lower bound. Okay, and the reason. Okay, so the first question that we really ask is, can we is there a lower bound, or can we actually do better in terms of the number of projection oracle calls than compared to the projected subgradient descent in the same setting? So standard black box Lipschitz convex minimization subject to a convex constraint set, bounded convex constraint set. We know that the number of first order oracle calls has to be at least 1 over epsilon square, and projected subgradient descent indeed couples both the first order oracle calls and the projection calls. So it also has 1 over epsilon square projection calls. So the question we ask is whether we can do any better than 1 over epsilon square. Okay, and the thing is, we actually don't know of any lower bound on the number of projection calls. Is the question clear? I can maybe take a question if there is something with respect to the question that we are asking. Okay, so let me move. Okay, so before I actually go there, let me convince you why worrying about the number of projection oracle calls is actually important. Because like most of the prior work actually only focuses on minimizing the number of first order oracle calls, and very few, actually we don't have any work which asks whether the number of projection oracle calls can be reduced from 1 over epsilon square. And the example that I would want to present is on low rank matrix support vector machine, where we have a bunch of data points, AI, BI. So the data points have AI. So the AIs are the features and BI is the prediction. Okay, so AI, BI are the training data points, right? And the AI in particular here is actually a matrix valued data point. Okay, for each matrix valued data point AI, we want to be able to predict BI, and we are given a bunch of training points AI, BI, right? And in many settings, it turns out that you want to regularize the predictor X. Okay, so the predictor you want to come up with is X, and you want to regularize. And one popular way of regularizing matrix valued predictors is by imposing a constraint on their trace norm or nuclear norm. Okay, which is nothing but the sum of singular values of X. So you want to minimize. This is the hinge loss, where you are taking max with respect to max of 0, 1 minus bi x ai, right? This is a hinge loss on the ith example, and then you are taking average over all the examples, and you want to minimize the hinge loss on all the training data samples subject to this constraint. Okay. So the first thing to note is that hinge loss is actually a non-smooth and convex function, because non-smooth because we have a max here, and max of two convex functions is again convex. So this is indeed convex. Okay. The second thing to note is that when we are projecting onto this nuclear norm constraint here, right? This is the constraint set. This requires you to actually compute all the singular values and then truncate the smallest singular values. Okay. But nevertheless, the projection onto this nuclear norm ball actually requires computing basically a full SVD of the matrix X, and this can take time which is cubic in the dimension of the matrix. Okay, so going over all the data points and computing the gradient here may actually be much cheaper compared to computing the full SVD of the iterate X. Okay, so here, for example, a first order oracle call may be much cheaper than a projection oracle call. So we would actually want to worry more about the number of projection oracle calls we need to make rather than the first order oracle calls. Okay, so that's basically the point. So the projection oracle calls can often be very expensive in practice as well. So we also want to minimize the number of projection oracle calls. Okay, so let me first give you a classical, a previous approach, which tries to improve upon the number of projection oracle calls. So we know that gradient descent has number of first order oracle calls and the projection calls equal to 1 over epsilon square, right? So I'll first tell you about another algorithm which can actually get a different complexity for the projection oracle calls, and basically the standard gradient descent and the other method that I'm going to present are the only known ones before our result on improving the number of projection oracle calls. Okay, So in order to give this other algorithm, I need to take a detour and explain you the accelerated gradient descent algorithm for smooth convex functions. Okay. So a function is said to be L smooth if the gradients are well defined at all points and the gradients themselves are Lipschitz continuous. So here, what I mean is that the Euclidean norm, the L2 norm of grad f of x minus grad f of y. So both of these are vectors, right? So I'm taking the L2 norm of the difference of gradients at 2 points is at most a constant L times the norm of x minus y. Okay. If a function satisfies this, it's said to be L smooth. And if you have a L smooth and convex function, and again you're in the black box setting where you can access the first order information, meaning that you give an x and then you get a gradient at that point, right? Then there is the accelerated gradient descent algorithm, which I'll go through here. Right. So there is an accelerated gradient descent algorithm which gets a better convergence rate in terms of epsilon dependence. And the accelerated gradient descent algorithm does the following. So you start again with a point x0, and instead of maintaining just one iterate, you have two iterate x0 and z0, right? What the algorithm does is it computes a convex combination of xk minus 1 and zk minus 1. So you call it yk. And then you update zk to be a gradient step at zk minus 1, but you're using the gradient at yk. Okay. And then you're projecting back onto the convex set, right? So that will be zk. And then xk is again a convex combination of xk minus 1 and zk. And then you again have xk and zk, and then you continue this procedure. Okay. So this is the step which uses both the projection and the first order oracle call, right? So you are using the first order oracle at yk, and then you're projecting a point which is zk minus 1 minus the gradient at yk. Right. So the complexity guarantee we know for accelerated gradient descent is that it finds an epsilon suboptimal solution in a number of iterations, which is square root of L over epsilon. Okay. So earlier it was 1 over epsilon square. Now it's square root of L over epsilon, right? And so the number of first order oracle calls and the number of projection calls is square root of L over epsilon, because in each iteration you are doing only one projection call here and one first order oracle call here, right? So the first observation we can make is that even if you can somehow approximate the non-smooth function using a smooth function with by a smooth function where the smoothness parameter is like say 1 over epsilon, then the number of projection calls automatically reduces to 1 over epsilon. Okay, so because L equal to 1 over epsilon, and then this will be total 1 over epsilon, which is number of projection calls, right? Okay, so how do we try to do this? The standard approach is to use what is called randomized smoothing, where you convolve the given function with a Gaussian distributed random variable, a random vector with covariance matrix, which is epsilon square times d inverse. Okay, d is the dimension and epsilon is the desired suboptimality. What this convolution means is just that you pick a random variable zeta from standard normal random variable zeta, right? And then you compute the expectation of f of x plus epsilon over square root d times zeta. So this is a smooth version of x. So for example, if zeta, if epsilon was equal to 0, right, then this term will just disappear, and this expectation is just f of x, right? It's the same as the original function. Whenever epsilon is very close to 0, it means that this new function approximates the original function f of x very well, right? And as an example, so let's consider f of x, which is mod x here, right? If you smooth it, you get this f hat epsilon of x, right? And if epsilon equal to 0, it will be exactly the same original function. Whenever epsilon is non-zero, it kind of smooths this non-smooth point here, right? And the properties that we know of randomized smoothing are the following. First, that if you are using smoothing with a parameter epsilon, then f hat epsilon of x is at most f of x plus some constant times epsilon. Okay. And f hat epsilon of x is for any epsilon is always an upper bound on f of x. Because it's convex, averaging increases the function value, right? So f of x is less than or equal to f hat epsilon of x. At the same time, f hat epsilon of x is upper bounded by f of x plus some constant times epsilon. The second property is that the new function f hat epsilon of x is actually convex for any epsilon, and it's also O of square root d over epsilon smooth. So the gradients of this new function are Lipschitz continuous with a parameter which is square root d over epsilon. So we have a non-smooth function. So we smooth it using some parameter epsilon, and then the new smooth function has these properties. Okay. Now what we can do is apply accelerated gradient descent on the smooth function, right? So this is a natural approach, and the first thing that we need to note is that we don't have access to the first order gradient oracle for f hat epsilon. We only have access to the first order oracle of f, right? It turns out that because this is just an expectation of of the function at different points, right? You can actually, the gradient of this can again be written as an expectation of gradients of the function at all these different points, right? And so you can approximate the gradient of this f hat epsilon of x as an average of first order oracle queries at a bunch of different points using different random variables zeta I, right? So in particular, if you take an average over t epsilon equal to d to the minus 1 over, so the exact constants are not important, like exact terms here are not very important. We'll put them together later. But if you average over some t epsilon number of data points, you get a reasonably good approximation for the gradient of f hat epsilon of x, which you can then use in the accelerated gradient descent algorithm. Okay. So what it does is this AGD plus randomized smoothing. So you again take a linear combination of xk minus 1 and zk minus 1, which is yk, right? Instead of compute, because we don't have access to exact gradient of f hat epsilon at yk, we compute an average, we compute an approximate version of this gradient, right? And for zk, we use this approximate version of the gradient and move in that direction and then do the projection, and then we continue the algorithm. Okay. So the algorithm is the following. So we approximate the gradient of the smooth function and then use this in accelerated gradient descent algorithm. Okay. Now, because we said the smoothness parameter L is square root d over epsilon, right? The total number of iterations of accelerated gradient descent, you have to do some error analysis here, but it turns out that the error analysis is fine once you pick t epsilon to be something like this, right? Once you have this, you the number of iterations turns out to be square root of L over epsilon, which is, so you just plug in the value of L here, which will be d to the 1 over 4 divided by epsilon iterations. Okay. So this is the total number of iterations you need to run of this in order to get to an epsilon suboptimal solution. So let me. Okay, so there is a question I could take now.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah.
I just want to ask you two things. First, that this nuclear norm, maybe just I will also put my video on so that nuclear norm that you are talking about,
Yeah.
that's a convex function because you have summed these singular values.
Yeah. Nuclear norm is a convex function.
But there's a lot of use nowadays also of the 0th order norm where you're just counting the non-zero elements.
Yeah.
So
That's
some
a not. Yeah,
huh,
that's the rank of the matrix,
huh,
and it's a non-convex function. So
huh,
usually that's replaced by this nuclear norm, which
okay.
is computationally tractable.
Okay, this type of this accelerated gradient descent that you are showing, it looks almost like the nested of accelerated gradient descent. Is this a similar sort of thing,
It's
or
the same. It's the same. It's the same.
it's the same thing? But why
Yeah.
you are using because you are trying to get the functional values of f with which you are doing this kind of. So why you are just writing this first order oracle out? I mean, so you're not really interested whether that output is a gradient or not, real gradient or not.
So the first order oracle does indeed output a gradient of f at the point that you are
Yeah,
giving
yeah.
it input.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So that's a gradient actually.
Yeah. FO is gradient.
Okay.
FO stands for first order. First order oracle just returns the gradient of f at whatever point you are giving it.
Okay, done.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so let me move on. So, right. So we are doing accelerated gradient descent on this random smooth function, right? And as we said, the smoothness parameter of the smooth function of the smooth version is square root over epsilon. So the number of iterations of this accelerated gradient is square root of L over epsilon. And if you plug in the value of L, you get this d to the 1 over 4 divided by epsilon. So this is the total number of iterations. Okay. Now, let's use this to understand what is the number of first order oracle calls and what is the number of projection calls, right? So in each iteration, in order to compute this approximation, right, we are using T epsilon first order oracle calls, right? And we set T epsilon to be this d to the minus 1 over 4 over epsilon. And it turns out that when you actually do this, the d just goes away. And this indeed only takes the same 1 over epsilon square first order calls that projected gradient descent also takes. Okay. Now, if you look at the number of projections, we are doing only one projection step for every iteration, right? So the total number of projection oracle calls is the same as the total number of iterations, which is d to the 1 over 4 divided by epsilon. Okay. And for small enough values of d, this could be indeed better than 1 over epsilon square. And in particular, this at least tells us that actually maybe something better than 1 over epsilon square may be possible. But the main issue with this bound is that it has this dimension dependence. And as we mentioned, we are usually interested in high dimensional settings where any kind of dimension dependence will be very cannot be tolerated, right? Because the dimension that we are thinking of here is extremely large. So the question we would like to ask is whether we can remove this dimension dependence in the that we are getting in this randomized smoothing, where this dimension dependence is coming because of the randomization, because of the smoothing, and we end up with this square root defactor in the smoothness parameter, right? And so the question that we are asking is, can we actually improve upon the number of projection oracle calls beyond 1 over epsilon square and d to the 1 over 4 over epsilon, while maintaining the same 1 over epsilon square first order oracle calls? Okay. And our main result, yeah.
Can you comment a little bit on like other smoothing approaches such as Nesterov smoothing and smoothing using Mohiu envelope?
Yeah. So Nesterov smoothing actually cannot work with a black box situation. So it needs a minimax kind of formulation for the non-smooth function. So if your non-smooth function can be written as max over y g of x comma y. Okay. So
okay. I think that is the same issue with Mohiu's envelope. It does not work with...
No, Morrow smoothing, actually our approach does depend on Morrow smoothing, and we will see that using it naively has some issues, and then we actually modify it. So our main idea is indeed to work with Morrow smoothing, but you have to be careful in how exactly you do it.
Okay.
But Nesterov smoothing does not work in the black box setting, because Nesterov smoothing works only when your non-smooth function f of x can be written as some max over y g of x comma y. For example, like f of x could be max over y x transpose a y, right? So this is indeed a non-smooth and Lipschitz function, and you have explicit representation of this thing in terms of a max over y, where g of xy is a smooth function, right? So Nesterov smoothing works only in those kind of situations and does not work in the black box setting. Yeah. Okay. So our main result is that we can actually design a method which finds an epsilon suboptimal feasible point using 1 over epsilon square first order oracle calls and only 1 over epsilon projection oracle calls. Okay. So in terms of the first order oracle calls, as we said, like this is indeed optimal, and there are lower bounds saying that in the black box model, information theoretically you cannot do any better than 1 over epsilon square. In terms of the projection oracle calls, our result improves upon the 1 over epsilon square projection complexity of gradient descent and the d to the 1 over 4 over epsilon of randomized smoothing. Okay. And we actually don't have any lower bounds on the number of projection calls required. So that's actually an open question. Maybe whether we can improve this further is unclear. So this is our first main result. So I can take any questions if you have like any questions on anything I have covered so far. Okay, so let me just check the chat. So there seems to be a question. I can take it. Okay, so maybe if you have any questions, you can type it in the chat and then I can take it later also. Okay, sounds good. So this is our main result, and then now I'll explain what exactly is our method and how it works. Okay. Right. So before we go there, let me just show you like the empirical performance of how our method works. So this black curve is the performance of our method. So the y-axis is the suboptimality at the kth iteration, and the x-axis is the number of first order oracle calls made till the kth iteration. Okay, and so this is the first order oracle number of first order oracle calls. We can see that in terms of first order oracle calls, it's very similar to predicted gradient descent. So the red one is with a fixed step size of 1 over square root t, and then the blue one is a diminishing step size where 1 over square root t, where t is the iteration number. Okay, and while it uses the similar number of first order oracle calls, if you look at the number of projection oracle calls, right, our algorithm uses much fewer projections compared to the variants of predicted gradient descent with different step sizes.
Right? Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
What is not making possibly to clear to students is that when we are talking about point-wise convergence, like convergence of xk to x bar or fxk to fx bar, something like that, then the type of conditions that we take on the step length, basically the square summability is very much required. But while we are just looking for suboptimality, the such square summability is really not required on the step length. This is a point which I don't know, people don't make it clear, but that has to be made clear. I also had a discussion with Nesterov on this, and he agreed that the step sizes differ in point-wise convergence and this kind of computation of this kind of complexities. So
I guess let me just say that we are using like the standard step sizes that are prescribed. I mean, otherwise you have to have some kind of, like, even if you are willing to search for the optimal step size, you have to have some kind of rule. Otherwise,
that is not, no, what I'm telling that once you are trying to have a point-wise convergence, the standard convergence with mathematicians do, mathematical optimizers, but then you need the square summability of the step sizes. That becomes very important, the Robinson-Monroe type step size.
Right.
While here we don't require it. This is a very stark difference, that when you are studying complexity, the way you choose step size is very different than when you are studying point-wise convergence. It's a very stark point. I don't know. Students should actually at least get it clear. The research students at least.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Sounds good. So, right. So the step sizes that we are using here is like 1 over square root capital T, where T is like the final thing when we are saying fixed. And for diminishing, we are using 1 over square root little t, where T is the iteration number. And we are comparing with this because this is the standard step size sequence, both in theory and when people use this with non-smooth convex optimization. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So our main approach is to actually, instead of consider randomized smoothing, actually consider the Morrow-Yoshida smoothing of Lipschitz functions, which also goes by the name of infemal convolution. So the function f epsilon of x that we consider is defined as the following. So we take min over x prime, where x prime could be any point in the space Rd, f of x prime plus this regularization term 1 over 2 epsilon x prime minus x square, which kind of forces x prime to be kind of close to x. Okay, and so to get intuition for the function f of x equal to mod x, the we saw that randomized smoothing is slightly above the function, right? Whereas the Moreau smoothing or the Moreau envelope of the function is actually slightly below the function. And the properties that that are very well known of the Moreau envelope of a Lipschitz convex function are the following. So the first one is that this f epsilon of x is always smaller than f of x, because like this minimizer is indeed less than or equal to x prime. So when you set x prime equal to x, where you only have f of x, right? So this f epsilon of x is always a lower bound on f of x, and it's not too bad of a lower bound, meaning that the function value f epsilon at x is only at most epsilon smaller compared to f of x. Okay, so it's not much smaller than f of x. Okay, so this is an approximate lower bound. The second property is that this f epsilon of x is again convex, and because whenever the function f is Lipschitz continuous, this new smooth function is actually smooth and with a parameter which is 1 over epsilon. So epsilon is the parameter here, right? So the smoothness of this new function f epsilon is 1 over epsilon, right? So so this O notation hides the Lipschitz constant of f, but we assume that it's constant. So the resulting function is 1 over epsilon smooth. Now, what we can do is apply accelerated gradient descent on the Moreau envelope. So the other thing that we should note here is that compared to randomized smoothing, the main difference here is that there we had a dimension dependence in the smoothness parameter, whereas here we have no dimension dependence, right? So this is the main idea behind why we can even get rid of the dimension dependence. Okay. Now let's try to apply Nesterov's accelerated gradient descent on the Moreau smooth function, right? In order to do that, we need to understand. So this is the Moreau smooth function. So we need to understand what the gradients of this f epsilon of x look like. And it's again well known that the gradients of f epsilon of x has a closed form, and it's given by this x minus prox f of x over epsilon, where this prox f of x is nothing but the minimizer of this function. So f epsilon of x will have the definition of this has a minimizer x prime, right? And that minimizer x prime is what is known as this prox f of x. And because this function here is strongly convex, this proximal point is actually very well defined, and the gradient of this smooth function f epsilon can be written in terms of x and the proximal point of x with respect to the function f. Okay. So once we have the gradient expression for the smooth version, we would like to accelerate gradient descent on this function, right? So we again take yk, which is a midpoint, which is a convex combination of xk minus 1 and zk minus 1. And we compute yk prime, which is the proximal point of yk with respect to f, right? And then this term here without the beta k. So yk minus yk prime over epsilon is indeed the gradient of the smooth function, right? So we have this expression here. So if you look at the gradient f epsilon at yk, right, then we'll have yk minus yk prime divided by epsilon. So that's the quantity here. And then you move in the direction and then do the projection back. Okay. Now let's try to understand. So yeah, so this proximal step. So there are two steps that are important here. So the proximal step and then the projection step here, right? So the total number of iterations of accelerated gradient descent that's required in order to obtain an epsilon suboptimal solution for f epsilon is 1 over epsilon, because the smoothness parameter L for this smooth function is actually 1 over epsilon. So there is no dimension dependence. So the number of iterations is just 1 over epsilon, right? And because of this, the number of first order oracle calls is the number of iterations, which is 1 over epsilon, times the number of first order oracle calls in order to approximately compute this proximal operator. So we need to solve this. And it turns out that the number of first order oracle calls that's required here is 1 over epsilon square. So the total number of first order oracle calls is 1 over epsilon cube. Okay. Now, on the other hand, if you just look at the number of projections, then you only have one projection per iteration. So the total number of iterations is 1 over epsilon projection oracle calls, right? So what this algorithm does is it strictly improves the number of projection oracle calls to 1 over epsilon, right? But it does not maintain the optimal 1 over epsilon square gradient calls. it increases the number of gradient calls or the first order oracle calls to 1 over epsilon q, right? So ideally, we would like to get this 1 over epsilon projection calls while maintaining the 1 over epsilon square first order oracle calls. And in order to do this, we take a deeper look at the function that we are trying to minimize, which is this f epsilon x, right? Which we are minimizing, which we have written as min over x prime. This thing. So this is just the full form of the Moore envelope, right? Now, if you combine both of these minimizations, right? So each inner minimization now required 1 over epsilon square first order oracle calls, and this is the reason that the total number of first order oracle calls became 1 over epsilon q, right? So in order to somehow try to solve this better, we actually combine both of these minimizations over x and x prime and write this joint optimization problem. Okay, so you want to minimize over x in the constraint set and an x prime, and you want to minimize f of x prime plus 1 over 2 epsilon x prime minus x square. What this does is that it actually decouples the objective and the constraint. So what we mean by that is that this is the original problem that we wanted to solve. You can write it as minimize x in C and then an x prime, f of x prime, subject to x equal to x prime. Right? We are introducing this new variable x prime with the constraint that x is equal to x prime, and then we are using f of x prime. This can now be relaxed to be approximate by adding a penalty term, which is 1 over 2 lambda times x minus x prime square, right? So instead of having exact equality, we are putting a penalty on the difference between x minus x prime square with a penalty parameter, which is 1 over 2 lambda. And now the constraint is only on x, which appears here, and x prime, which appears in the function, is actually a free variable, right? So when as lambda goes to 0, this is equivalent to this, because this term will ensure that x is equal to x prime, right? And Morrow regularization theory suggests that we should choose the regularization parameter lambda to be approximately epsilon for this to kind of approximately equal this, right? And we can indeed show that if you define this entire function to be this psi lambda of x comma x prime, right? What Morrow the results on Morrow envelope tell us is that if you have a point x twiddle and x twiddle prime, right, which minimizes this function psi epsilon of x approximately, meaning that so this thing is small, then the corresponding x twiddle, so the function value at x twiddle is off from the minimizer by only the suboptimality gap here plus some O of epsilon, right? If you can somehow find an x twiddle prime, which is an epsilon suboptimal solution for this problem, then the corresponding x twiddle will indeed be a epsilon suboptimal problem for this thing, right? And the other thing to note here is that if x twiddle prime is feasible for this problem, it means that x twiddle has to be in the constraint set, because this minimization includes a constraint on the first variable, right? So the new goal now is then to find an epsilon suboptimal and feasible solution to this problem, psi epsilon of x prime, where x is constrained to be in C. And the reason this is actually helpful is because we can write this psi epsilon as f of x prime plus 1 over 2 epsilon x minus x prime square, right? If you just look at the first part, right, this is an unconstrained convex problem because there is no constraint on x prime. X prime can be anywhere, right? And if you just use standard gradient descent algorithm, then the number of first order oracle calls is 1 over epsilon square, and the number of projection oracle calls is 0, because you don't actually have any constraint. For the second part, we see that it's actually a 2 over epsilon smooth convex optimization problem in terms of both x and x prime jointly, right? However, the function does not appear here. So the number of function calls here, like first order oracle calls required here, is actually 0. And the only calls that are required here are the calls to x prime. The projection oracle calls to the set C, right? And if you use accelerated gradient descent, right? So that will again give you square root of L over epsilon, which is 1 over epsilon, right? Because the function is 1 over 2 epsilon smooth. So if you just add both of them naively, then the number of first order oracle calls required is 1 over epsilon square, and the number of prediction oracle calls required is 1 over epsilon. And this is the ideal bound that we would like to get for this composite objective. And we know how to get for each of these individual things. And the gradient sliding algorithm of George Plan does exactly this, which is that it takes the sum of a composite objective function which has two parts. One, which is Lipschitz continuous, and then the other one, which is a smooth function, and then it gets the optimal complexity in terms of the first order oracle calls for this one, for both of them separately. Okay, and we can actually use this gradient sliding algorithm on the modified psi epsilon function, and it indeed gives us this 1 over epsilon square complexity for first order oracle calls and 1 over epsilon for projection oracle calls. So let me describe our method in more detail now. So we want to minimize this function psi epsilon, which is defined like this, right? And this function, which is L2 square norm divided by 2 epsilon, is indeed 1 over epsilon smooth. So the accelerated proximal gradient algorithm on this psi epsilon, what it does is that it takes a convex combination of x bar k minus 1, z bar k minus 1, right? Now zk and z hat k prime are first updated using the gradient of this part, right? And the first variable zk, so okay, so the bar variable is just a concatenation of both the x and x prime variables, right? The zk is the first part and z hat k prime is the second part, right? So zk just takes gradient descent from zk minus 1 and it only appears here, right? It does not appear in this part. So it just takes a gradient here and then projects it back onto the set C because that's a constraint. The second part, z hat k prime, it again uses z prime k minus 1 and moves in the gradient direction of this part, right? However, for the accelerated gradient descent to work by itself, it would have required f to be smooth, but we don't have f to be smooth. So one way, so a modification of accelerated gradient descent that works even for non-smooth function is if you replace the gradient step with a proximal step. Okay, and in order to do that, we need to compute zk prime to be a proximal point of z hat k prime, okay, with respect to f, and that requires minimizing this function, okay, where you have f of z prime plus beta k over 2, and this is a penalty term requiring z prime to be close to z hat k prime. Okay, and then x bar k is again a convex combination of x bar k minus 1 and z bar k, right? So you have zk prime, this will define z bar k, and then x bar k is a convex combination of x bar k minus 1 and z bar k. All right. So the projection step is coming up only here, right? And the first order oracle calls will be used here in order to compute this proximal operator. So f is only appearing here and the projection operator is only appearing here, right? So the total number of iterations of accelerated proximal gradient descent is again square root of L over epsilon, because this is 1 over epsilon smooth, right? So the total number of projection oracle calls is just equal to the number of iterations, which is 1 over epsilon. And the total number of proximal calls turns out to be that it only requires 1 over epsilon first order oracle calls in order to implement this proximal step approximately. Okay, and this will give us 1 over epsilon square first order oracle calls. So to summarize, using this inexact gradient sliding, which is basically this inexact accelerated proximal algorithm on this Moreau envelope kind of function, gives us a requires only 1 over epsilon square first order oracle calls and 1 over epsilon projection oracle calls. Okay, so I can take any questions at this point if you have anything about this part of the algorithm.
Yes, hello.
Yeah.
So there is one work, this is stochastic Frank-Wolf for composite convex minimization by Loch-Taylor. So they also have this sum of smooth and non-smooth function. So they are doing this Nesterov smoothing. So can you please elaborate this thing, why we cannot use this Nesterov? They have this non-smooth function. The inner part was, the argument was a form of AX, that is where A is some linear transform.
Yeah.
They were
So
doing-
as I mentioned earlier, so for example, in Morrow smoothing, we have not assumed anything about the knowledge of f, right?
Yes.
So f can be just a black box oracle, and we only have gradient access, right?
Yes.
Nesterov smoothing you can do only when f can explicitly be written as a max over smooth functions. So for example, if you have max over linear functions, right?
Yes.
Then like each linear function is of course smooth, right? And max over linear functions need not be smooth. For example, mod x can be written as max of x comma minus x, right? So like only in situations where you have explicit form for the non-smooth function can you use Nesterov smoothing. You cannot use it in general situations. Does it make sense?
So, okay.
I have one question.
Yeah.
You said in this part 1/2 epsilon x minus x dash whole square, there is no first order call to oracle, because first order call to oracle is only for f. Or
Yeah,
is it
correct.
here also you have to compute the gradient? Is it that because you know the gradient explicitly?
Yeah, that's correct. So we are using the gradient where we are saying here we are using, so we are denoting this by this phi epsilon of x comma x prime, right? And then we are using this gradient x phi epsilon of y bar k. So we are not counting this as a first order oracle call because like we know this function explicitly, and we can like it's just difference of x minus x prime.
I also want to ask you, Praneeth, which I'm very interested in, is that in machine learning or whatever in practice, do you, for example, instead of using the Euclidean norm, do you use any other kind of distance like Bregman distance or kind of those kind of things? Do you really use them in practice? That is what I want to know.
So in standard deep like machine learning, no, but in reinforcement learning, people use something called natural gradient, and natural gradient is very similar to using the KL divergence for mirror descent with KL divergence. Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, but otherwise, in most of the like practical ML applications, it's just Euclidean gradient descent.
Okay.
Mirror descent is used in like heavily in the context of online learning, where it goes by the name of multiplicative weights, or it's mirror descent with KL divergence again.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Also, just adding that mirror descent is also used when your variable is like a probability distribution. So KL divergence makes sense. So in the context of Bayesian optimization.
I see. Okay. So sounds good. So this is our first main result. So I mentioned, so the main result is an algorithm which for non-smooth convex optimization, which uses like the optimal 1 over epsilon square first order oracle calls, but reduces number of projection oracle calls from 1 over epsilon square to 1 over epsilon without any dimension dependence. Now people have, yeah.
Just a question that if we like in terms of x, this is x prime, sorry. In terms of x prime, the objective function is still non-smooth.
It is non-smooth. Yeah, so that's why we are using a proximal step for whenever we are doing with respect to f.
For handling f.
So,
but it is still convex jointly with respect to x and x prime.
That's correct, because the first part, okay, so convexity is preserved under addition, right? So f only depends on x prime, it does not depend on x at all, right? So this part is convex, right?
Yeah.
And this part is again jointly convex in both x and x prime.
Okay. So if we were to jointly solve it with respect to x comma x prime,
yeah,
we would again have to use projected subgradient, which would be 1 by epsilon square, 1 by epsilon square, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's why you need to use this more sophisticated like proximal algorithms, so that you get like different complexities for both of them, right? Okay, so one setting that has been considered in the literature whenever like projection is very expensive is what is called like just assuming access to a linear minimization oracle, where for projection oracle we return, so given any point G, we returned a point which is closest to G, right? Whereas linear minimization oracle returns a point which minimizes the inner product between G and X, subject to the constraint that X is in C. And a very popular algorithm that works with linear minimization oracles is this Frank-Wolf algorithm. However, like it only works for smooth convex functions. Right. So, for example, in the context of nuclear norm ball, linear minimization consists of computing the top singular vector, whereas projection oracle requires us to compute the entire SVD. Right. So, computing the top singular vector is much cheaper compared to computing the full SVD of the matrix. So, the Frank-Wolf method does the following. So, we are at this point xk minus 1, right? And it computes the gradient gk minus 1 at xk minus 1, right? So this is the gk minus 1 direction, and then it computes so it asks the linear minimization oracle which point in the constraint set has the minimum inner product with gk minus 1, right? So the oracle returns say vk minus 1. So vk minus 1 is the response of the linear minimization oracle for gk minus 1. Then xk is a step from xk minus 1 in the direction of vk minus 1. So this will be xk. And then you again do gk and then find the response of the linear minimization oracle and then move in the direction and so on, right? So Frank-Wolf method is very popular in the machine learning community as well. And it's very well known that for L-smooth convex functions, it converges in L over epsilon iterations. However, the main issue is that we don't know of any kind of extension of this to non-smooth functions. And the only approach known earlier is again based on this randomized smoothing, which again has dimension dependence, because you are smoothing this function randomly in the space, and that's the reason you get a dimension dependence, right? And we again develop an algorithm which we call moles, which extends the Frank-Wolf algorithm also to non-smooth convex optimization problems using 1 over epsilon square first order oracle calls and 1 over epsilon square linear minimization oracle calls, right? And the first order oracle calls, again, we know of the lower bound from earlier. And for the linear minimization oracle setting, it turns out that there is actually a matching lower bound, which shows that any algorithm has to use at least 1 over epsilon square calls to linear minimization oracle. So in this setting, our algorithm is actually tight and achieves the optimal gradient calls as well as the linear minimization oracle calls. Okay. And the main idea behind this new algorithm moles is doing the same earlier projection efficient algorithm, except that because we don't have access to projections, we do inexact projections using the Frank-Wolf method. Okay. In terms of empirical performance, it actually works quite well. So if you look at the black curve, which is our algorithm, the first order oracle calls, so we compare with randomized Frank-Wolf, which is doing Frank-Wolf on the random smooth version, right? That's this greenish thing. And the red one is so doing projected gradient descent, but for the projection, we use approximate Frank-Wolf, right? And two different variants with step sizes. So that's the red and blue. So in terms of first order oracle calls, we are much better than like all the other methods. And similarly, even in terms of number of linear minimization oracle calls, we do better than the remaining approaches, right? So the main idea is the following. So this is the MOPS algorithm where, so this was the projection step and this was the proximal step, right? So the inexact proximal step stays exactly the same. There is no difference because we have again access to the first order oracle, right? In terms of the projection oracle, we don't have access to a projection oracle onto the constraint set, but it turns out that using, we can do an inexact projection using only 1 over epsilon linear minimization oracle calls per projection, okay? And that gives us this, so if you use the Frank-Wolf method naively, it would require 1 over epsilon square here because the smoothness parameter of this function is 1 over epsilon, right? But it turns out that you can do something a bit more cleverly using an idea called conditional gradient sliding, again from a paper by Lan and Zhao, and that requires only 1 over epsilon linear minimization calls per projection step for implementing each of these in exactly, right? And that multiplied by the number of iterations again gives you 1 over epsilon square. Okay, so this achieves 1 over epsilon square first order oracle calls as well as linear minimization oracle calls. So to summarize, we designed a method for constrained convex optimization using only 1 over epsilon projections while maintaining the optimal number of first order oracle calls. And similarly for the setting with linear minimization oracles, we designed a variant of Frank-Wolf which uses 1 over epsilon square first order oracle and LMO calls. And we, like all our results, essentially go through without any change, even for with a stochastic first order oracle, where we have access to only random vectors, which in expectation are indeed the gradients, but have some amount of variance. Okay. So the two main open questions from our work is to understand whether there is indeed a lower bound for the number of projection oracle calls in constrained non-smooth convex optimization, and extending our results to non-Euclidean geometry. So the main challenge here is that Morrow envelope is very well studied with the Euclidean geometry, but only recently people have started studying Morrow envelope with non-Euclidean in the non-Euclidean settings. And there are several properties in the Euclidean setting that do not carry over to the non-Euclidean setting. So yeah, so this is indeed like quite non-trivial to extend our result to non-Euclidean geometries.
I just want to mention my own experience with this non-Euclidean setting.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of use by mathematicians for extending proximal point type algorithms, which is essentially Yoshida regularization stuff, using Bregman distance. So Bregman distance, you know.
Yeah.
So I have recently tried to use proximal gradient type methods using Bregman distance. And I actually applied it to get a Pareto minimizer, a Pareto front, not just a single objective.
Okay.
The problem with this, once you have this non-Euclidean distances, the runtime just goes up like anything. There's certain problems which have runtime of the CPU time of 5 hours plus. So that becomes kind of a huge problem, because in reality you can't spend so much time. So but these in non-Euclidean geometry, I'm sure you'll find a lot of time with the time that the machine will take to actually give you back the answer. It'll just go on computing.
So computing the proximal point with this Bregman regularization, that takes a long time, is what you're saying?
Absolutely, it is very hard. Non-Euclidean, you can take other norms, like you can take the elliptic norm, possibly. That might be of help with some positive definite matrix. More flexible than Euclidean norm.
Yeah, so yeah, I think with ellipses, because it's just a rotation, those things I think work out fine. It's more when you go to these Bregman divergences.
Yeah, my latest experience is 5.5 hours. Just you have put on the problem and it's just going and going. Usually, if you put it on the Euclidean thing, it will just give in few seconds. You just even can't realize the answer is here. But one is just going on. I do not know. I've written a paper and I don't know how to report it actually. There are several problems which is working very well, but several problems is not working with very scale divergence, various types of Bregman divergence. Just don't know how to report it. What I'll say, okay, I'm putting my hands up, kind of thing. And I have spoken to some other people who have worked in this kind of non-Euclidean thing. So if you look at this paper by I think this famous guy called Auslander, or Alfred Auslander, who had started, or Chen and Auslander, the famous paper where they first started using this Bregman divergence. What happens is that hardly their papers would have actually numerical computation. They'll do mathematical analysis and etc. But because those to converge also, the type of conditions you require, you'd never be able to satisfy them in practice. That I can assure you. So that's a big problem with this non-Euclidean thing. Thank you. It was a fantastic talk. I enjoyed it very much.
Thanks. Thank you. I can take any other questions as well.
Pandit, so when you are saying that stochastic FU, you are talking about this stochasticity in Frank-Wolf thing also. I mean LMO.
Yeah, in both the settings.
Both the settings. So how you
yeah.
are tracking that gradient? I mean, because in LMO we know that we cannot directly replace with stochastic gradient. We need some kind of gradient tracking, right?
Yeah, so I guess so the issue with directly using stochasticity in LMO is that LMO is very unstable.
Yeah, non-vanishing gradient.
No, I mean, like it's very unstable, meaning like a small change in the gradient can actually totally give you a wrong, different output, right? So this LMO oracle.
Actually, my question was exactly that. What we do in stochastic LMO is that we use a gradient tracking technique by this famous paper on by Aryan. But recently there is another work called Strom. So people are using in Frank-Wolf this gradient technique of Strom also, this recursive momentum technique. But whenever we see new paper on Frank-Wolf, which is using some other technique, they just go with that usual gradient tracking. They do not use this Strom technique. Is there any particular reason for that, or?
No, I guess like, okay, so let me say that we are not really modifying Frank-Wolf. So we are actually using like a kind of accelerated gradient algorithm in the outer loop. And we are using Frank-Wolf only to approximately implement this projection step, right? So that way, yeah, so we are saying Frank-Wolf method because Frank-Wolf is kind of synonymous with the linear minimization oracle setting. But like the correct, technically, the correct, technically correct way to say this would be optimal non-smooth algorithm with LMO in the LMO setting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess one question would be that this would not directly apply to stochastic because accelerated is not there in stochastic, right?
No, you can.
Or you are talking about finite sum where there are other versions of accelerated.
No. So accelerated you can apply in stochastic. I guess like the convergence rate. Again, you can get a composite kind of thing. So if your function is L smooth and the stochastic gradients have variance sigma square, right? Then there are these composite algorithms which can get a convergence rate of square root of L over epsilon plus sigma square over epsilon square. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So now if you just put both of them together, L here will again be like this 1 over epsilon thing, right? So in terms of projection oracle calls, it will again be just 1 over epsilon. In terms of subgradient calls, it will be 1 over epsilon square.
Okay.
Right. So when we say accelerated gradient descent is not there in stochastic setting, what we mean is that asymptotically you cannot get better than 1 over epsilon square because that's information theoretically necessary, right? But you can split the dependence on the smoothness of the function and the variance of the stochastic noise, and then you'll get square root of L over epsilon plus sigma square over epsilon square. And for this you need acceleration. Standard gradient descent cannot get it.
Okay, so essentially it is being used, but its disadvantage which is there in stochastic case, that is not hurting us here.
Sorry, can you?
No, what I'm saying is that generally the accelerator has this disadvantage that this momentum term does not help at all in the stochastic setting. But
right, it does not help with the sigma square term. But here it does help in the projection number of projection calls.
Okay.
So like it strictly improves. Yeah. So in terms of first order oracle calls, it of course cannot improve because that's optimal. But in terms of projection calls, it does improve. It improves from 1 over epsilon square to 1 over epsilon.
Hi Parinit, I just wanted to ask one thing.
Yeah.
So for this moles, you replace this projection calls, this projection oracles with LMO.
Correct.
So can we do this for MOPS also, the first algorithm?
I mean, in the MOP setting, we assume that we have access to a projection oracle. In the mole
Okay,
setting, we
so what-
assume that we do not have access to a projection oracle. So we are using the linear minimization oracle to approximately implement this ourselves.
Okay, okay. I was thinking whenever we want to reduce the number of projection calls, so we can choose LMO over this projection oracles. Is it like that?
No, it's not like that, because if you count, the MOPS thing had 1 over epsilon projection oracle calls, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But the
yeah.
mole thing has 1 over epsilon square LMO calls. So it's not the
Yes.
same. So if you are just using LMOs, it's actually you need more number of LMOs.
Oh, more number of calls.
More number of calls.
Okay.
Whereas if you are using projection oracle calls, you need fewer. You only need 1 over epsilon.
Okay, so we can use LMO whenever we don't have access to PO. This
PO,
projection
but there will
oracles.
be like you'll have to use more LMO calls.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. So for example, I mean, in situations like trace norm minimization or something, LMO will be computing the top singular vector. PO will require computing the full SVD, right? Now you can maybe trade off between 1 over epsilon times computing full SVD and 1 over epsilon squares times time for computing the top singular vector. And you could use whichever is better.
Okay. Okay, fine. Thank you.
Yeah.
So any other questions from the audience? Okay, if there are no more questions, let us thank the speaker. Very interesting talk, Praneeth. Thanks a lot for this talk.
Thanks, Ketan.
So yeah, we can just we can just chat a bit and then we can say goodbye to you. So a few other comments I had, general comments, not particularly related to this particular algorithm, is that in terms of smoothing, there are a lot of different techniques people have proposed for special kinds of functions and so on. And their performance is often like much better than they never require 1 by epsilon square, for example. Sometimes they require 1 by epsilon.
Correct. I mean, the most well-known kind of smoothing is this Nesterov smoothing, which smooths max kind of functions. So if your function can be written like you haven't, so your function is non-smooth, but you clearly know how the non-smoothness is coming. Like you have an explicit description of the function. So there it's just 1 over epsilon. Although yeah. So for example, the matrix SVM thing that I showed you just now, right? That does not fall into that category. So there are indeed functions which don't fall into that category. For example, in this case, so you don't have a single max over multiple functions, but rather you have a sum over multiple maxes, right? So if you want to implement Nesterov smoothing kind of thing, you have to go over all the data points every time you do this. You do an update, right? So it's not easy to directly work with stochastic. Yeah. So for saddle point, so basically you smooth this and then you apply some saddle point algorithms. So that's the main idea behind those techniques. And their stochastic algorithms are not very well understood yet. And in cases like the matrix SVM that I just mentioned, right? Stochastic algorithms are what you would really want to implement if the number of data points is very large. So in those settings, these algorithms directly go through, because like SGD is the standard one. So you just pick one data point and then use it for your algorithm, right? And the algorithm that we are proposing basically works in the same model, where you again pick a random data point and use its gradient, right? But algorithms based on smoothing the saddle point, smoothing the saddle point formulation, right? The stochastic counterparts are not yet fully understood. There have only been recent papers on using like variance reduction and things like that. Yeah.
Okay. So this is more, in other words, this is more amenable to stochastic
Correct.
counterparts,
Correct.
right?
Correct. Correct.
Okay. Yeah, so that is all I had.
Sounds good.
Okay, so
Okay.
thanks, Praneeth.
Yeah. Thank you, Ketan.
See you later.
Yeah. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.